we're talking origin stories.
Oh, yeah.
Want to hear how you got into the world of comics, what led you down this career path, just whatever you'd like to share, but it's just more of an opportunity to hear how you got to your current role with DC.
Well, mine's kind of a ramble because I didn't grow up reading comic books. For me, I could draw, so I was always drawing. And my introduction to superheroes was Linda Carter. And because of her, and then the Batman reruns and the Superman films and the Super Friends cartoon that told me that they knew each other, I would draw those characters all the time. And on the rare occasion when I would see a comic book in Australia when I was growing up, if I saw a comic that had those characters in there, they were also surrounded by like Green Arrow and Black Canary, and I'd be like, who the fuck are these people? I don't really understand. I didn't understand that was the source material. And so I never grew out of my love for Wonder Woman, and I continued to draw her and get in trouble for it at school. And then during my 20s, I didn't draw at all because I was pursuing an acting career. And when that was stalling and not sort of really satisfying, it's like, okay, I need to do something else. I come from a creative family, so a creative redirect is absolutely normal. And I was just trying to work out what I could do with drawing to make a living. And after quite a bit of time of sort of investigating options that sort of would present themselves to me and not feeling satisfied or that I would feel satisfied with any of them, I changed the question in my head from what can I do with drawing to what do I want to draw. And as soon as I thought of that, I was like, oh man, I wish someone would just pay me to draw Wonder Woman. And immediately that was followed by, oh my God, hang on. That's a real job because Wonder Woman comes from comic books. And even though I don't know anything about comic books, I don't know anything about the industry, I'm at the time, the wrong gender, in the wrong hemisphere, in the wrong country. It's like, fuck it, that's what I'm going to do. And it was a decision that was made like that, but it was backed up by a 100% certainty that I could make that happen, despite the fact that I didn't know anything. I was just like, right, I'm just going to be really dumb for a while, but I can learn this. And so I went straight to a comic book store. I knew where there was one, even though I'd never been in, because it was near my parents' house. And I just started buying comics and chatting to the guy who worked behind the counter and asking him questions and, pretty dumb questions. I said, do you know anyone who does this? And he was like, yeah, I kind of do it. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, oh, I write my own stories and I draw them and I sell them at conventions. And I'm like, what do you mean? And conventions in Australia at the time were like 50 people in a conference room. But I went along to one of those and met the sort of rest of the people in Australia or in Sydney that were sort of hustling for the same thing. But pretty much the idea was a hobbyist idea. And I was like, this is great. I got my first job there doing some covers for the only publisher that lasted about 2.5 years. And it became very clear to me straight away that what I needed to do was come here. I said, how do you make a living in this? And they were like, oh, forget it. You have to go to America. And I'm like, of course you do. That's where the business is. See what I mean? Dumb questions. And so I was like, right, I'm just going to buy a ticket and go to America. And in Wizard magazine, there was a half-page ad for San Diego Comic-Con. And it just said, the biggest convention in the world. And I was like, right, it's the biggest one. I'll go to that. And that was like 25 years ago. And my first portfolio was pretty terrible. And everyone told me so. But I came away from that going, right, now I know what I need to put in a portfolio and what it needs to look like to sort of make myself employable. And with the help of Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, I started to understand comics. And that was kind of the beginning point for me. My second year at San Diego, I got a bunch of little jobs. My third year at San Diego, I got Star Wars comics. My fourth year at San Diego, I got DC.
And that is an incredible run. And now you've got Wonder Woman Historia, which is getting massive recognition.
Yeah.
Your Titans run has just been incredible.
Oh, thank you.
I've absolutely loved everything you've done with Tom. How do you two work as far as a dynamic duo? What is your collaborative style?
Well, Tom and I have known each other for a while, like before we worked together on Earth 2. We'd known each other for a few years by that point. And I think it kind of helps that we're both Australian because the shorthand is really similar. We don't sort of have to sort of Americanize our expressions to be understood. And when we worked together on Earth 2, that was kind of our first time working together, and it was such a joy, and he's such a sweetheart. And he writes for character, and he writes sort of beautiful, nuanced character beats to go along with his, giant violent moments. And that's always a treat to draw. So when I was approached to do Titans, it was literally the day after I handed in my last page of Historia. And I was like, oh, hell no, I'm so tired. Please leave me alone. But then Brittany, our editor, said, well, Tom's writing it, and it's these characters, and, you get to design all the costumes. And I'm like, oh, you're ticking all of my boxes. God damn it. And so I agreed to come on.
So now that you've gotten a lot of time with the Titans, is there a clear favorite in your mind, or are they equal favorites?
Oh, boy. Look, I will always have a soft spot for Donna because she's part of the Wonder family. And I kind of related to her long before I understood the dynamics of the Titans. When I first encountered the Titans, Dick Grayson was still Robin to me. So sort of encountering this new Nightwing persona was sort of like what's this all about? And it wasn't long before I understood that he was destined to become Nightwing, to become his own man, that his training was fantastic, but he was never really meant to be Batman. He's meant to be his own person. So I always have a soft spot for him. But I find whenever I'm working on characters, even characters that I've sort of never really thought twice about before, and I'm working on them with a writer that really understands them, I find myself falling in love with them deeply because I get to spend so much time with them crafting their faces and their expressions. I sort of act out all of the parts. And so it's a little like choosing your favorite kid. I don't really want to do it, but my original love was Donna.
Fair enough. As far as upcoming things, we know that you've been doing this incredible cover series for DC.
Yeah.
I would love to hear how you go about crafting these covers in particular, because obviously you're pulling in from the history and the immense catalog of DC.
Yeah.
But what goes into designing these ones in particular for you?
Well, the first cover that I did in the whole series was Superman when he turned 80. The pitch was to do a Superman through the ages, and I suggested it like a class photo. And so the research that went into that was about sort of finding the iconic versions of each decade and, the artist that is responsible for those iconic versions. And then kind of, because he doesn't wear a mask, kind of deep diving into who the reference might have been for their version. What actor might have been their reference point for what Superman should look like. And that sort of sent me down quite the rabbit hole. And so it was just a lot of research and then sort of execution. Certainly for my first one with Superman, I put George Reeves in, and I put Christopher Reeve in, and I put Henry Cavill in. Knowing that there was a decent chance that they would say, no, we can't use likenesses, because that's often the case. Which they said, and I was like, that's okay, I've got a backup plan, and put in the Fleischer version, a sort of more, the sort of trademarkable S for the 70s version, and my Earth 2 Superman. And so that kind of gave me the formula. So when they came back to me the following year, when Batman was turning 80, it was like, right, I'll just recommit to the formula, doing the same thing, the research into the iconic versions of each era, who those artists were, what their style was. It's still got to look like my art. I'm not trying to sort of cut and paste other people's artwork together. But sort of really properly understanding what it was that they were aiming for and getting the silhouette right and the proportions right. And with the new series, when I got to do these, it was such a relief because I've been asked about doing more of these forever. And I'm always like, when DC commissions them, I will be more than happy to do them. And they contacted me at the end of last year to say we're doing artist spotlights throughout 24. We'd like you to be September. And this is actually what we'd like you to do if you'd like to keep going. And I was like, yeah, let's go. Sorry about all the swearing.
You're fine.
So I knew of a few that needed to be done because they're the ones that I was asked about the most. And we had a list of other ones that we could kind of negotiate around. And the same kind of thing, it was like sort of looking into their history. Some of them are older than others. Harley's only been around since the 90s. But certainly with the girls especially, there's so many costume varieties. Even if it's just variations on a theme. I quite like the idea of a variations on a theme because that was the original concept of, not going to the extremes, but just sort of doing the update of the classic design. But I also sort of allowed myself to have a little bit more fun with them. If they were Justice League characters, I'd be a little straighter with it. But anyone that was kind of slightly outside of that sort of rigid status, I was like, right, I feel like I can play a little bit with what we're doing here in terms of costume and design.